Imagine for a moment one of the most miraculous technologies in the world. If, like me, and you're located in the United States, you probably see this thing every day. About 1 million people work on them. You maybe live about roughly 10 minutes away from them. It's one of the most fascinating pieces of American history, and it's frequently hidden in plain sight unless you're being required to get out of its way. Have you guessed what it is yet? It's an ambulance. Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my BookTube channel. Today I want to talk to you about a book that, like the ambulance, I almost didn't read because I knew next to nothing about it. And that is American Sirens, The Incredible Story of the Black Men Who Became America's First Paramedics by Kevin Hazzard. So again, if you're anything like me, you have probably become a little bit obsessed with watching the HBO medical drama, The Pitt. That is not normally my scene, but it was something that I heard was a really good show, and then I got completely sucked in, and I really love it. There's an episode where there is a black man, older black man, who's a patient who knows a lot more about medical details and like how to take care of patients than the doctors expect. And it comes out that this man was a medic in the Freedom House ambulance, which is a real thing that existed in Pittsburgh in the 1960s. I had never heard of this before, but it was essentially the first professional ambulance service in the United States, and it set the tone and the standard for basic principles of things like the ambulance, advanced life support care, the creation of paramedics and EMTs as whole like jobs and professions. And it did so not just for the United States, but also for emergency medical services throughout the world. So I knew I had to learn more about this than just what I could learn from reading the Wikipedia article. So I went to my library and wanted to see if they had any books about this, and that is how I came across American Sirens. This is a book that is written by Kevin Hazzard, who is a former paramedic turned writer, and he writes this primarily with a lot of interviews with a particular man called John Moon, who was one of the original class of paramedics graduated and begun the Freedom House ambulance service in Pittsburgh. So this book takes us a little bit through like the history of ambulances and emergency medical care. Again, you're going to hear me say this a lot. I did not know this, but one of the most interesting things that I learned from this book is that the modern ambulance really only dates back to about the 1960s. The sort of earliest recorded ambulance that we have actually comes from the like Italian Renaissance, where a group of friends had a swear jar essentially, and one day they all got drunk and decided that they were going to use the money from the swear jar to buy some stretchers so that they could carry sick people from their homes to places where they would go to get medical treatment. And that was technically the first ambulance. The history of the ambulance sort of comes in fits and starts after that, usually around major wars like the Napoleonic Wars or the Civil Wars, because we get this increased awareness of the fact that like most people that are getting shot aren't like dying instantly on the battlefield. They need to be brought somewhere for treatment if there's a chance that they're going to survive. But again, there's no sense of like professionalism or existence of like a civilian ambulance corps outside of the military. So in the 1960s, we have this group of black men, John Moon becomes one of them, who are starting this like mutual aid kind of organization that's called like Freedom House. They have a vehicle. They're providing a lot of mutual aid to the black neighborhoods in Pittsburgh during the times where, you know, the civil rights era is really beginning, segregation is being challenged in the courts and at like the personal and community level. And then we also have Dr. Peter Safar, who is known as the father of CPR. This guy is not just the father of one thing, okay? Like, he invents so many different things. He invents CPR, the concept of modern emergency medicine as a specialty for doctors, the intensive care unit. I mean, was there anything that this man did not touch in the realm of emergency medicine? I don't think so. His story is absolutely fascinating. He grows up in an Austria that is occupied by the Nazis, starts to become a doctor, and there's an amazing scene where he's like a young medical student and he's like stuck in this hospital that's caught in a siege between like the Germans and the Soviets, and like what he and the other doctors have to do in order to survive the gunfight and be able to continue taking care of their patients. So in some ways, this guy was really primed for emergency medicine, right? So there's this idea that he has of trying to create a professional corps of civilians that are able to provide advanced life support and save people's lives en route to the hospital. This begins to happen because of some really high-profile deaths where Peter Saffer, the doctor, believes that those could have been prevented had the person received adequate medical care en route to the hospital. But at this point in time and at this location, a lot of the ambulance services, such as they are either police cars where they roughly throw you into the back seat of the police car and hope that you make it to the hospital alive, or actual hearses run by funeral homes that are basically only picking you up in the hope that your relatives will pay them to bury you once you have died, because they're not providing medical care. They're just transporting you to the hospital and basically hoping to get a paycheck out of it. So they decide that they're going to create this ambulance corps. And the reason why this happens where it does is that this group of Black men are already kind of producing this mutual aid, but nobody is really willing to take a chance on this as emergency medicine except for this community. Partially because the ambulance corps comes from within the community. It's very much kind of a grassroots recruitment that then becomes professional, but also because people just don't want to, I guess, like experiment with white lives. Like this experiment in emergency medicine is not seen as like good enough, safe enough, effective enough for white people, but it's good enough for the Black community that doesn't really have any other access to regular health care. So this sort of first two classes of the Freedom House Ambulance Corps is recruited from the neighborhood, and they have a resounding success. There's a lot of different ups and downs, trials and tribulations that the group faces, but by and large, it's so incredibly successful, and the state of emergency care is so good that people from the like Black neighborhoods, which tend to be poorer neighborhoods as well, have these better health outcomes by the time they arrive at the hospital than the like wealthy white neighborhoods that don't want Black people coming and providing ambulance care and providing emergency medical services in their neighborhood. So this is so successful that other cities start to take note. They begin to implement their own ambulance services modeled after the Freedom House ambulance service. There's another doctor named Nancy Caroline who gets involved, who begins to do like the beginnings of disaster training, which is a real thing that you train for if you have like EMT or paramedic or anything like that certification. She also gets involved with the Gerald Ford administration to create like a nationalized EMS curriculum. The textbook that she wrote is actually still the textbook. I think it's in its 8th edition now, but it's still the textbook for EMS all of these years later. And it's so successful that the ambulance service is really trying to expand and be able to get enough funding to sustain itself. Unfortunately, this is also a story where like the real villain is a lot of like government bureaucracy and one particular politician who becomes the mayor of Pittsburgh, who doesn't believe in the public-private partnership and is racist, basically. Like he doesn't come out and say something that's so overtly racist, but a lot of the racism is in sort of the actions that he takes and sort of in the implied policies about whose lives are of value and whose projects are worth investing money in. Essentially, this ambulance service is underfunded, and the mayor does everything he can to try and make it fail because of a lot of, I think, really poor political beliefs on his part, poor leadership on his part. But eventually there's so much of a public outcry that no, we need this ambulance service, that it finally gets funded. Unfortunately, this is also a story about like what happens when people from marginalized communities create something and then it's popular and successful. So people from the like majority community come in, take over, and essentially like push out the Black professionals and a lot of women professionals, Black women and white as well, who were involved with Freedom House. That was touched on briefly in the Pitt. They talk about in the episode how the program was so successful that the city of Pittsburgh comes and takes it over, and like Freedom House is essentially no more at that point. A lot of the different people scatter to the winds. Some of them become paramedics in the city ambulance system. Some of them leave like the healthcare world altogether. Nancy Caroline goes on to work on developing EMS abroad and helping other countries get their EMS figured out. But this book was just so well written and so fascinating. And I think a great strength of Kevin Hazzard's writing actually comes from the fact that he did so many oral histories and interviews with the surviving members of the Freedom Ambulance House service, and also with people who were adjacent to the project. Peter Safar has since died, but he does a lot of interviews with his wife, Ava Safar, who was very much like involved in the community of Pittsburgh as well. I learned a lot about like the history of Pittsburgh as a city as well, which I didn't know a whole ton about. The history of ambulances, but also the really fascinating story of John Moon, who is, again, I believe this medic on the front of the book. And it's really his story. It's a story about his life and his journey, and kind of how emergency medicine gave his life a trajectory and a purpose and a meaning that he didn't have and wouldn't have necessarily found without it. So this is a great history of the ambulance service in America, but it's also a really good portrait of this man who's still living and whom the author thanks in his acknowledgments. This is not a book that I would have picked up without hearing about it at the Pitt. And that is one of the things that I love so much about good art, is that I get pointed to other good art from it. I don't think that that was necessarily something that this TV show intended, but I'm really happy that that happened regardless, and I would definitely recommend the book if you're interested in weirdly specific nonfiction, which, let's be real, if you're watching my videos, you probably are. American history, medical history, stories about the civil rights movement, or stories about the so-called like forgotten people of history. There were so many facts about ambulances and EMS that blew my mind in this book that I never knew. And I'm someone that has gone through various versions of EMT training over the years. Currently, I'm certified as a wilderness medic, which means that I can provide first aid and basic life support when help is hours to days away, as opposed to minutes to hours away, which is what the sort of basic community first aid covers. So again, I'm bringing my own background knowledge to this book, but there's so much in here that I didn't know, and that I think is just really exciting and written in an engaging and accessible way. So I would definitely recommend that you read American Sirens. Let me know if you know anything about this. If you're also watching The Pitt, what are your feelings about the highly controversial Dr. Santos, and why is Dr. Al-Hashimi the best? That's my personal favorite. But let me know. And if you have any good, like, weird nonfiction or highly specific nonfiction book recommendations, please also let me know down below. That's like one of my favorite genres of books as well. I hope you all are doing well. Thank you so very much for watching as always, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.